Measles is one of the most contagious diseases we know. Just one person is likely to infect between 12 and 18 people. That number is called a disease's basic reproduction number, or R0. Scientists use it to describe how contagious a disease is. Zika, it has an R0 of up to 6.6, super contagious. But the seasonal flu, just a little over 1. And COVID-19, the disease caused by the coronavirus, just about 2. That difference between the flu and COVID-19 doesn't seem so big, especially when you look at them next to these really contagious diseases. Plus, a lot of the symptoms of the flu and COVID-19 are really similar. A fever, cough, they can even both lead to pneumonia, which is ultimately how they can both be fatal. So thinking of COVID-19 and the flu as similar is a common and frankly understandable comparison to want to make.
This is like the flu?
It's a lot like the flu.
I like to believe that it's going to end up more like the flu virus.
But wait, let's go back to those R0 numbers again. If the flu has an R0 of 1.3, that means each person gets either 1 or 2 people sick. After 10 rounds, that's 56 total people. And if we run the model with COVID-19's R0 at 2, if one person with it gets 2 people sick who get 2 people sick, after 10 rounds, that's more than 2,000 people. This does not happen with the flu, because COVID-19 is very different, and understanding how is crucial to understanding how dangerous it really is, and why we have to take it so seriously.
When we start to look for that comparison to the flu, we almost calm ourselves down. But unfortunately, that's not quite the right reaction here.
Every year, the seasonal flu kills as many as 60,000 Americans. As of late March, COVID-19 has killed about 34,000 across the whole world. But scientists expect that number to go up, way up.
Tens of thousands of people a year die of the flu. But we haven't had this for a year yet. We've only had this for a few months. The trouble is coming, and we can predict it, and we can see what's coming, at least to a certain extent.
The first really big difference between COVID-19 and the flu is how long it takes you to feel sick. From the moment you're infected with COVID-19, it usually takes 5 days before you start to feel symptoms. But it can take as long as 12 or even 14 days. This is the incubation period, the time between when you catch it and when you first realize you're sick. And scientists think you could be contagious during most of this period. The flu, by comparison, has an average incubation period of just 2 days. You get sick, and pretty soon you feel sick, and you know you're contagious. This is what we're used to. But COVID-19 flips that around. You can be contagious and spreading it around for several days and up to 2 weeks before it even occurs to you that you're sick. And that leads to the next big difference.
No human immune system had seen this virus before. Nobody has a natural immunity to it.
In flu season, there's always a number of people in the population who are already immune to the flu. That can be because they got their flu shot, or maybe they've already had that flu strain. And that limits the spread of the virus. When one person is contagious with the flu, they can only spread it to people who aren't immune, who can only spread it to other people who aren't immune. That's why scientists and doctors urge us to get our flu shot every year. If enough people have immunity, they can kind of shield the virus from reaching others. The more immunized people, the more they can protect those that are susceptible to the virus. But COVID-19 is brand new. None of us have had it before, and there's no vaccine, which means nearly everyone on the planet is susceptible. So when a contagious person, who may not even know they're infected, comes into contact with others, it can spread like wildfire. And then you see how much more dangerous COVID-19 can be. Only 2% of people with the flu need to be hospitalized, but 20 to even 30% of people who test positive for COVID-19 do. And we're still learning about COVID-19's fatality rate, but scientists think it's somewhere between 1 and 3%. But the flu's rate is even lower, 0.1%. And that's a disease that can kill 60,000 people a year in the US alone. That's what Dr. Anthony Fauci, the US's leading infectious disease expert, tried to clear up to Congress.
People always say, well, the flu does this, the flu does that. The flu has a mortality of 0.1%. Sure. This has a mortality of 10 times that. This is a really serious problem that we have to take seriously.
And he's just talking about the average across all age groups. For older people or people with compromised immune systems, it can be way higher. And that's especially scary when you remember all the other things that are different about COVID-19. The infectiousness, how hard it is to know you have it, how susceptible we all are to it. Estimates vary, but some scientists have warned that between 20 and 60% of the world's population could become infected with the virus. Because COVID-19 has no cure and no vaccine, the only defense we have against it is social. We can take ourselves out of the chain, not with immunity, but with social distancing. Just physically not being around anyone and staying home as much as possible. But that only works if each of us takes it seriously, which is why comparing it to the flu, while understandable, is not helpful.
It's natural to want to find a comparison, to want to make this seem small. When we use the flu as the backdrop, it almost numbs us, or it can numb us and make us maybe even feel better about the current situation, because the current situation is bad. So now is not the time to be numb. We need to be vigilant and then use our vigilance for useful actions.
They think 50 to 70% of all of us will get exposed to it.
So by social isolation, the thinking is we're not going to stop it. People are still going to get this. It's still going to be transmitted, but it's not going to be that big hump. That's what the isolation is all about.
The reason we're all on lockdown or social distancing is that they're assuming everyone potentially has it and doesn't know it because they don't have enough tests.
So when we end the isolation, we will probably see an uptick again, but we aren't going to see that big curve, and the healthcare system can manage it. And hopefully enough people have developed an immunity, either a natural immunity, which is they're thinking some people may actually have a natural immunity, or an immunity because they have had the virus and survived it. And by this time, some of these fast-track medications may help to create that. And then we're looking ultimately at what's called a herd immunity. This is the question, what happens next? In an ideal world, what would happen is that the isolation has been so complete that people have followed those recommendations to such a degree that the virus has burned itself out and that we all go back to our lives. The reality is that not everyone is following those, and when this quarantine period is over, that virus is still going to be viable in some segments of our population. That is pretty much a given right now.
This is actually not a living thing, right? And I think a lot of people have a strange relationship with it because they feel like it's this enemy that's going to live anywhere and wait to get us, right?
A virus does not even meet the biological definition of life. People say, well, if it's not alive, how can we kill it? And we can't kill it. You can't kill what is not alive. What we're doing is we're trying to deactivate it. You can think of it as information. All a virus is genetic information, DNA, very simple DNA that is wrapped in a lipid, a protein shell that protects it. And as long as that shell is intact, that is when the DNA is viable. Simple things like washing our hands actually break down that outer shell so that the information in that virus is no longer viable.
The worst thing for people is to sit in front of the television doing nothing but being filled with anxiety and not eating well, not exercising, because guess what? That will really damage your immune system. And if your immune system is damaged, when you get this virus, you're going to be much sicker.
Mushrooms, for example, there are peer-reviewed studies of mushrooms, very specific kinds of mushrooms. Agarikon is an antiviral mushroom. Turkey tail, an antiviral mushroom. Some reishi has some antiviral as well as antibacterial effects. And the reason they work is because this virus, it's a spherical virus that has protrusions on the outside. Some people are calling them spikes, but when I see them under the microscope, they look more like protrusions. They don't look like, sharp, pointy spikes. Those protrusions are looking for places on the exterior of our cells, receptors is what they're called, where they can dock just like a space shuttle docks to the space station is what they're doing. And the supplements, the antiviral supplements, such as the mushrooms, what they do is they blunt those protrusions or deactivate those proteins so that even though they may find a human cell, they cannot communicate with that cell. So they're meaningless to us. We're not infected by the virus. It is a very bizarre way of thinking that's something that we cannot even see with a naked eye. It's hard to see with a microscope, and it is something that's not even alive. It's just changed our planet forever. It will take a season for our bodies to learn what to do and how to develop the antibodies. We will develop, as a species, we will develop the antibodies. We are literally designed to meet these kinds of challenges. Our body knows exactly what to do if our body is given what it needs to do that. So our body knows when that virus is in our body, there's an attack from our white blood cells that will identify it, they will attack it, we'll start creating antibodies. In the process of doing that, our body will create a fever to raise our core temperature to make us inhospitable to a foreign virus. So that's what the fever is doing. This virus attacks the receptors. Those little protrusions are specific for receptors on the cells in the lung, in the human lung, and particularly in the lower lungs. So this is a little bit different than the upper bronchial kinds of infections, deep in the lungs. So our job is to give our bodies what it needs, to keep us strong so that we can sustain ourselves in that battle, that we ultimately are successful in if our body is given what it needs.
The response to this and the virus itself may have a more devastating effect socially and civilizationally, and how we live and our livelihoods and what have you, than the virus itself.
We can't go back into the world that we knew 3 or 4 weeks ago because that world no longer exists. We're entering into a new normal.
I'm not sure that anything's going to be quite normal as before. This may be a civilizational change. We'll see.
The question is, what does that new normal look like? The answer is, we don't know because we're determining it right now. The choices we make right now are determining the world that is emerging.
The virus may run its course, but the havoc it will play in society in terms of the economy and unemployment and people really being distressed will be longer lasting, frankly, than the virus.
I believe, more than think, I believe we're going to be better people. I believe we're going to have a better world because of what we've just gone through, because it has exposed the cracks in the foundation of society, the cracks in the foundation of our systems that we rely upon. What's sustainable, what's not, what works, what doesn't work.
It was discussed in 2015 that this should not be done. There were 2 main scientists that said this should not be done. The virus is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. This is very important, and I'm going to show you evidence of that. So you need to be aware of this stuff. You need to be aware of the agenda. Don't be paralyzed by fear, because this is part and parcel of their agenda. The number of people that have died so far since January 1st, 2020 from the seasonal flu is 110,823. 110,000 from the seasonal flu. This is infectious. This is contagious. This is something people catch. From communicable diseases, okay, these are diseases that can be transmitted from one individual to another individual. You're looking at 2,959,790. Now, this is just a hair under 3 million. This is again from January 1st, 2020 till today, which is early morning, March 24th. So you're talking about a cause of disease that people will catch from someone else, 16,758 that have died, compared to 110,000, again, 110,000 from just the seasonal flu, and 2.9 million worldwide from any other type of communicable infectious disease process. This is the number died, this is the number that recovered, and most of these people, of the 102,000 that have recovered within 24 to 48 hours. it's been labeled as a bioweapon by some people, and of course the media, says that that's conspiracy theory. But let's look at the actual configuration of what this virus, what COVID-19 is. So the first thing is I want to say that this wasn't because people were eating bat soup, okay, or transferred from snakes or sloths or whatever they said. The virus is not a naturally occurring phenomena. This is very important, and I'm going to show you evidence of that. Now, this virus was actually created at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and they published the highlights of the creation in November 2015. The list of scholars associated with this Frankenstein of a virus, you'll see, named Zheng Li Shi, who just happens to represent the key laboratory of special pathogens and biosafety, Wuhan Institute of Virology, Chinese Academy of Sciences, Wuhan, China. Now, Dr. Shi, she's a key figure here. In 2014, Dr. Shi was the recipient of a number of U.S. government grants, as well as grants from the National Basic Research Program of China, the Chinese Academy of Science, the National Natural Science Foundation of China, and from the Strategic Priority Research Program of Chinese Academy of Sciences to assist in funding research into coronaviruses. Now, this is, remember, 2015. The U.S. government paid Dr. Shi and the Chinese government to fund research into coronaviruses. This was published in November 12, 2015, and this is actually the full article, the full research paper that was done. But what I want to do is I want to bring your attention to this March 2020 note that has been put there by the editors. And I want to read that first, then I'm going to go through the study, and then I want you to decide what this really means. So the editor's note before we start says, "We are aware that this story is being used as a basis of unverified theories that the novel coronavirus causing COVID-19 was engineered. There is no evidence that this is true. Scientists believe that an animal is the most likely source of the coronavirus." Now, it's obviously whoever wrote this, from the editor's note perspective, was either an idiot or doesn't understand the English language, but certainly wasn't a scientist, because I'm going to now show you what the study says. And remember, this is a warning now that they're putting here to dissuade people, to prevent them from actually looking at the science, to tell you that, look, the sky is not blue. Yeah, it looks blue to you, but it's not really blue. In November of 2015, an experiment that created a hybrid version of a bat coronavirus, one related to the virus that caused SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, as we discussed before, has triggered renewed debate over whether engineering lab variants of viruses with possible pandemic potential is worth the risk. This is the lead component, the first paragraph of the study that was published in Nature, probably one of the most respected journals in the world. So although almost all coronaviruses isolated from bats have not been able to bind to the key human receptor, which is this SHC014, which is the specific coronavirus we're talking about, was able to get into the human vector. So again, this is the study. This is what you see, reading the blue, and they're saying, whatever you see, it's not blue. Other experiments in the study show that the virus in the wild bats would need to evolve to pose any threat to humans. Okay, it would need to evolve, it would need to change, it would take time. A change that may never happen, although it cannot be ruled out. Barrick and his team reconstructed the wild virus, the naturally occurring form of the virus, from its genome sequence and found that it grew poorly in human cell cultures and caused no significant disease in mice. Okay, so here you're looking at a virus. It's found in bats. It's very difficult for it to jump to humans. Once in a human, in human cell cultures, it just grew very poorly, and in the mouse model, it didn't cause any significant disease. All right. The only impact of this work is the creation in a lab of a new non-natural risk, agreed Richard Albright, a molecular biologist and biodefense expert at Rutgers University in Piscataway, New Jersey. Why would you take a bug, a virus, a bacteria, and make it more potent, right? What's the purpose of that? Well, they say it's for research purposes. But why would you do research to make something more potent? We absolutely must resist government run amok, taking advantage of a crisis. This is how your liberty dies. Stand up, America, and resist. Department of Justice seeks new emergency powers amid coronavirus pandemic. This is the issue. This is what we need to be afraid of, that they're going to use this false flag type of event, hype it up to take away more rights, more freedoms, and create mandatory actions that people have to do, from quarantine to even more sinister things that are coming down the pipeline. So you need to be aware of this stuff. You need to be aware of the agenda. All right? Don't be paralyzed by fear, because this is part and parcel of their agenda. The virus is a self-limiting virus. It seems to burn through. If your immune system is intact, it's not going to affect you. And if it does, it's going to be very, very transient. 24, 48 hours, most people get better.